4.
7:02.
Coming up at 5:10.
The newsmaker of the day.
So cars that have been in bad accidents, written off, but somehow end up back on the car lots, bought by people and most worryingly back on our roads. It's a battle about which there has been a good deal of contestation. One of the parties involved in that has been the South African Motor Body Repairers Association. We're joined now by their chairperson, Charles Canning. Mr. Canning, welcome, and thanks very much for your time. As I understand things, and we'll come to a court case of great interest in a moment, all this, by the way, well summed up in an article on the MoneyWeb website. Roy Cocaine, the journalist who's done a really great job on this. But Mr. Canning, you've been wanting to get access to data around this held by the South African Insurance Association. What has that battle been all about? Why were you so intent on prevailing in this matter, and why were the why was the insurance body so reluctant to help?
Well, good afternoon, John. Thanks so much for having me. SAMBRA has actively been lobbying for, it's more focused on having the code 2's data loaded onto the VSD, the Vehicle Salvage Database, which is held by the South African Insurance Association. We're finding that the code 3's and above are being registered, but those cars are definitely uneconomical to repair. The code 2's are vehicles that are written off by insurance companies at 50% of the market value of the vehicle.
Right.
They're finding their way to salvage yards, and they are fetching top dollar at auction. They are then being repaired, often unscrupulously, and we have found on a number of occasions, after we conducted forensic assessments on these vehicles that were brought to our attention by the South African motoring public, that they should never, ever have made it back into the used car space and sold onto unsuspecting consumers. So we've really pushed hard. I think the ruling in the Gauteng Regional Court was a landmark win for the South African motoring public in terms of getting the salvage data made public on a form of database where somebody that's buying a vehicle can access this information and can actually make a full informed decision whether they are going to buy that vehicle or not.
So for people who don't know vehicles, something that's been written off, would I be right in saying it is now structurally unsound, and even if you can put on a shell that looks good, the car has what kind of fundamental defects, and why are those so dangerous?
So I use the term written off when we come to the code 2 space. I think I prefer to use the term uneconomical to repair.
Okay. Because
that's the term that's used in our space by the insurance sector. And they look at the value of the vehicle. They look at 50% being the cutoff. Remember, a couple of years ago, we would work up to 70, often 75% of the value of that vehicle to reinstate it to its former glory before the accident. And what is happening is often the safety components on these vehicles are compromised in these accidents. So whether it be a bent structure part of a vehicle, or an airbag has been deployed, or a cooling system has been compromised, or one of the mechanical parts has been damaged, we find that these vehicles that are landing back in the used car space, the airbags have not been replaced. They've just been patched back into the dashboard. Chassis structures have not been straightened correctly, having an adverse effect on the drivability of these vehicles. We've seen cooling systems from, for example, I really don't want to name manufacturers, but you could find a cooling system from manufacturer A placed into manufacturer B's vehicle,
right,
because of a cost implication. And this it is not right. And often these are vehicles that are still deemed under a factory warranty. They might be less than 3 years old or 5 years old, depending on the type of vehicle that you have. And you have these unsuspecting consumers that buy these vehicles, that pick up a small problem, maybe a warning light comes on in the vehicle. They then drive to their closest dealership, or into a panel shop for that matter, if they've had another little fender bender, and that then is where the problem starts.
And that all gets Yeah, and then that all gets laid bare. You referred, Mr. Canning, to a court case. I'll just mention the details for people, and then you can tell us why this is so significant. It was in the Joburg Regional Court. The magistrate, H.R. Viana, ordered a company, Jumbo Motors, to pay the client almost 227,000 Rand plus interest. And this was because they bought a vehicle that they were never told had been previously written off by an insurance company. Do you have any idea how this came to light, and more particularly, why does this have the significance that you believe it has?
So the significance here is the Code 2. Now, Code 2 is used vehicle status in this country on the eNatus database.
Right.
So if I sell you a car tomorrow, it's a Code 2 vehicle.
Right.
Whether it's been in an accident or not, it's still deemed Code 2. It takes the insurance company to scrap that vehicle on the eNatus system, which will then takes to Code 3. Certain finance houses will not finance Code 3 and up. So Code 2, the vehicle is still financeable, and that is why these vehicles are finding their way back into the used car space. What happened was this consumer bought a vehicle. There was an element of damage disclosed to them. I think the front bumper, it was pointed out to the consumer that the front bumper had been damaged. The consumer signed the declaration to say, no, I'm happy with it. It's all good. It's all fine. What's also to be noted is that the client was then handed a DECRA report to say that the car had a clean bill of health. The client then bought the vehicle, it was financed, bought the vehicle, and he drove off to Bloemfontein.
Right.
When he got to Bloemfontein, there was a mechanical failure. He went into the local dealership, and they said that they weren't even prepared to work on his vehicle because there was so much wrong with it.
Wow.
He then decided he was going to turn around and go back to Johannesburg. And en route back to Johannesburg, there was a mechanical failure on that vehicle, and the car broke down on the side of the road. He approached the dealership. The dealership at that point wasn't quite forthcoming in terms of assistance. He approached the Motor Industry Ombudsman in South Africa, who I believe quoted, "We are unable to assist in the matter."
Right.
And that is when the consumer approached the South Africa Motor Body Repairers Association, and we employed the services of a forensic assessor,
right,
who then looked at the vehicle, and we took that vehicle right back to its origin when it was insured by a comprehensive insurer in this country. We tracked that it had been written off in an accident. It was moved to a salvage yard. It was sold on auction. It was repaired poorly and found its way back into the used car space.
So now the development, I suppose, of more general application is that standoff with the South African Insurance Association it appears to have now ended, and the public will have access to the Vehicle Salvage Database. What is the significance of that? Because as I understand it, you at SAMBRA have been fighting for this for a while.
So the biggest challenge we had with SAIA was the publication of Code 2.
Right.
They agreed that Code 3 and up was available. We were saying, but because of these practices, and also let's just bring into a criminal element here as well. It's not that these vehicles are being bought at a premium on auction, repaired poorly and often cheaply and then sold on again. But often cars are bought and then the exact same vehicle is then hijacked or stolen. And then there's a cloning process that happens between the auctioned vehicle and the hijacked/stolen vehicle. So they will take that vehicle's papers, hijack a vehicle, clone it, and then sell it on as a used vehicle. So our biggest focus was consumer awareness, passenger safety, driver safety. We know what it takes in the SAMBRA environment in South Africa, what it takes to repair a motor vehicle correctly.
Right.
And I think it's time now that the South African motoring public have access to a database where they can see the full history of the vehicle they want to buy.
Thanks so much. Charles Canning, chairperson of the South African Motor Body Repairers Association. Have you ever been caught up in something like this? Bought a vehicle, had lots of trouble, and then in your attempt to resolve those troubles, found that the history of the vehicle was rather different to what you've been led to believe when you bought it? Maybe you've got a story of your own. Do give us a call. 20 minutes past 4.